all. Welcome to Authors at Google in New York. And we're here to welcome Amanda Pressner and Holly Corbett, two of the three Lost Girls. We've sent out information about it. They have a website, and now they have a book, and it's soon to be made into an ABC show next fall, I think it is, by Jerry Bruckheimer. So we're really happy to welcome them here. And also, one other note, there's a third Lost Girl, Jen, but she is actually, I think, working with Food Network on a shoot, so she couldn't be here today. So there's three. But we're happy to have two of them. So the three of these wonderful women in 2006 basically paused their jobs, as they described to me earlier, and they wanted to travel the world for a year. And so this book is just a memoir of them traveling the world and what it was like to kind of let go of their life in New York and jobs, boyfriends, family, and travel the world. So welcome to them. And then they're gonna read a little bit from the memoir, and then Lee's gonna moderate some questions. And feel free, once we open it up, to answer questions at the mic. And please join me in welcoming them to Google.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. We're really excited to be here at Google. We kind of wrote up some things to say, but we're pretty much just gonna ad lib.
And we can have people, if you want to kind of come in from the sides and the back row. I know you're going to be on your computer, and that's kind of, people are working through their lunch break. And probably later when we do questions, it might be easier just to pass the microphones around so you don't have to stand up. If that's cool. It'd be easier to pass them if we're a little bit more tighter knit, but.
Yeah, well, just to give you a little bit of background information about us. I'm Holly, this is Amanda, and Jen is away working today, so she couldn't be here. But it was about 4 years ago, 3.5 or 4 years ago, that the three of us were working in media in New York. Amanda and I were in magazines, and Jen was in television, and we were working a lot of hours. And it wasn't that we were unhappy with our jobs. We loved our jobs. We'd worked really hard to get there and to be working in magazines. But we kind of started to feel like there was more to life than sitting at our cubicle every day. And so as the months ticked by, we started to get more baby shower announcements and wedding invites and all this stuff, and we were getting to be in our late 20s, and we just started to feel some pressure to hit certain milestones, like find our soulmate, buy a home, have our kids, and get a big promotion at work, all by the time we were in our mid to early 30s. So we just kind of started to feel that way, and time was moving really, really fast. So it wasn't until we actually got away from work. We got to take a 10-day vacation, which was really rare. Somehow the three of us managed to do it. And we went to Argentina. And it was when we weren't on autopilot anymore, when we had more space and time for reflection, that we started to ask ourselves some really important questions. With deadlines hanging over our heads, we didn't really have a lot of time to think about, what direction we were heading in life. So we started to ask, are the jobs that we're at really the things that we want to be doing? What were we doing to give back? Were we in the right city, in the right relationships? And so Amanda kind of threw out this idea, what if we traveled for a year and took a year-long vacation? So after that, we never really thought it would happen, but the three of us kind of decided that, yes, this is something that we want to do because we want to stop living on automatic pilot. We want to get some space and time for reflection, and for us, travel was a really good way to do that. So,
yeah. So I didn't think, when I suggested taking, it's like a vacation fantasy. You're away for a week, you've escaped the office. We managed to have 10 days of escape, and we didn't bring our computers or Blackberries or anything. And it was really the most meaningful 10 days of my life. And I was with these two really great women. And when I threw out the idea to travel around the world for a year, I kind of never really considered that either one of them would do it. But we all encountered these challenges in our lives. And for me, it was, of the three of us, I was definitely the most workaholic type. I was at the office, I was working in a magazine, which is where I met Holly. And I was putting in a ton of hours thinking, at least this is one guaranteed thing in my life, that if I work really, really hard, I'll get promoted and I'll keep moving up the ladder. But I remember coming back from jury duty one day and finding out that not only did I not get this big promotion that I'd been slaving away to get, I'd been put on probation because I hadn't come into the office after jury duty, that I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I've got to change something. And I went back to Jen and Holly and said, were you really serious about taking this trip? And because of things they were going through in their lives, relationships that might not have been working out, or just this sincere desire to see more of the world, we all were like, let's do it. And we planned for 18 months. We saved, none of us had a ton of money saved up, but we worked hard. Holly got a job writing a column for a small magazine. And on June 20th, 2010, or 2006 actually, we left and we did this year around the world.
Yeah.
And then as far as the Lost Girls name, which you'll see at the title of the book, we named ourselves that kind of in jest because we really felt lost about our futures. And we knew from talking to a lot of other young men and women that we really weren't the only ones that felt that way. And for us, the trip was about, kind of pushing the pause button on the lives that we had to really reflect and figure out what made us happy so we could make smarter decisions about our futures when we got back.
Yeah, I mean, we feel like the path to adulthood is no longer as linear as it used to be. Like at our mom's generation, you tended to go to college, get married, have kids, and we have all these amazing choices and all these things that we can do, which is just incredible. But I think, for us, we just wanted to take some time out and be really mindful about like what we were doing. So for the year that we went abroad, we got to live out our real life bucket list. We got to hike the Inca Trail in Peru and take surf lessons in Australia. And volunteer in Kenya. And I think like one of the biggest things that we learned is that in New York, we felt like time was just speeding by. And when we were on the road, it was the longest year of our lives in the best way possible. Time just seemed to really slow down and become bigger. And I think it's because we were living really mindfully and everything was new. So we felt like we were a lot more present.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people ask of us and things we expected from ourselves from this trip is that if we took this year off, we better have some huge epiphanies about our lives and figure things out, and that maybe somehow we'd be different by the end of it. But as we learned taking this trip and going to these different countries and meeting a million different people, that the questions that you have for yourself and the answers that you expect to get from traveling are really never to the ones that you ask. And if we could go back and talk to ourselves when we were, in our mid to late 20s and stressing about, our futures, we might have told them that eventually you kind of realize not to sweat the small stuff, which is what we learned on the trip. But, I think if we'd known that and really accepted that, we might never have gone away and we wouldn't have traded our trip around the world for anything. So we're really happy to be here to be sharing the experience with you, and hopefully the fact that you're here in the room means that you, on some level, are interested in traveling and, maybe even if it's just for a short period of time. So we'd love to answer your questions today and answer Lee's questions about the trip.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Amanda, that you met Holly at work. How did you meet Jennifer? Like, how did you guys realize you had this common, like, frustration and then come up with the solution?
It's funny, I didn't even know Jen before we took the vacation to Argentina. I think Amanda and I were in the office, and it was 9 o'clock at night, and she said that she was going to take this trip with her roommate, Jen, and she knew Jen from college. And she asked if I wanted to go, and I said yes. And I charged the plane ticket, and I think they were kind of surprised, but that's how it all started. So
we were that desperate to get away.
we were
like,
really excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't even know Jen before the trip, but we slept head to toe for a year, so now we know each other really well.
I guess the bonding period was more after the trip, and it was more just like you made the decisions independently and then went on the trip together, and that's where you kind of found like this common thread.
Yeah.
Well, and if anybody at any point, grab a microphone, just jump up, pull it off the stand, or you can stand at it either way. If you have a question, feel free. Don't be shy. Well, I guess tell me about. I don't know. I've traveled a lot myself, but I've always traveled by myself. So I feel like it's in one way forces you to engage in the culture as well. Tell me about how you guys kind of reached outside of yourselves as a group and engaged in the culture. And give me a couple different examples of some places.
Well, Jen, unfortunately, is not here, but it was always her dream to volunteer in Kenya. I think for me, like, I could barely just wrap my brain around the fact that we were leaving to travel for so long. And fortunately, Jen and Holly actually had some really amazing ideas of things that we could do. Holly wanted to go to an ashram and learn to meditate and learn how to challenge I don't challenge ourselves in that way. Jen
Quiet my
wanted,
mind.
yeah, quiet our minds a little bit. But the volunteer experience, which was a month for us, we went to a farm in rural southwestern Kenya. And we showed up thinking, okay, we've signed up for this volunteer program. Great, give us some work to do. Give us some shovels and give us something. And the volunteer coordinator, who was a local Kenyan, was like, oh, there's no work today, maybe tomorrow. And that happened the next day. And the next day we were baffled, like, what are we supposed to do? And we went into the school, and there were already teachers teaching English. So we really had to challenge ourselves at that point to find a way to contribute to this community. And we were on the grounds of a school, but we learned when we got there that there were 12 preteen girls who had recently been moved onto the grounds of this school because as they were walking there every day to go to class, they were being attacked by local men who, in some cases, had committed acts of violence against them. And so we realized that these young women didn't have anybody really to talk to. They didn't have any mentors, they weren't counselors, because it really wasn't supposed to be a home. And we decided every day to start working with them and kind of drawing them out of their shells and playing games with them. And eventually we started doing dance classes with them because that's a background that I'd had. And eventually we wrote a play with them called A Tree Grows in Kenya. And and that was kind of a legacy we left with them. And by the time we said goodbye at the end of the month, we were all crying because we developed this tremendous bond with these young women, and all of them, we'd seen them blossom and feel stronger and safer, and that has forever changed the three of us.
Yeah, I think, the places where we stayed the longest were the places where we had the best memories. And that was probably, in Kenya or in Peru we stayed for a while. We lived with Amanda's friend in Australia for a while. So that was nice. We really got to know the places. But I think it's different, when you travel by yourself. I think people approach you more because you're alone, because compared to three of us could be kind of intimidating. So I think when you travel with other people, you kind of have to make more of an effort to put yourself out there and talk to people.
So tell me about when, it sounds like it started off as a trip. When did the blog come in? When did the idea for writing the book together come in to play? And how did that come into the website you guys have now?
Well, when we first took off for the trip, Amanda is our web guru, and she really wanted to keep in touch. And originally we started the blog to kind of keep in touch with our friends and our family back home. And that's kind of how that happened. But the blog Amanda can talk more about this, but it kind of took on a life of its own because, at first it was about us and our trip, but when we came back, there were so many other people saying, hey, I'm a lost girl, or I'm a lost boy. I want to travel too, or I've traveled, can I share my stories? So it kind of became, it's not really about us, but other people who really just want to share their stories. And from the blog, that's how the book came about, because a publishing company saw the blog and then asked us to do a proposal. And
yeah, I want to add that I'm not a web guru compared to anybody in this room,
okay.
but
We're at Google.
yeah, but right when we were planning to take the trip, it was the time where blogging and that platform had kind of just become a thing where normal everyday citizens could do it, and I knew that I wanted to have a way of keeping in touch with friends and family and colleagues and letting them know what we were doing, and this just seemed like a really easy way to do it. It was a challenge trying to keep it up as we were traveling, though, because we were in countries where there was slow internet, no internet. I remember going to Myanmar, which was Burma, and getting to that country with Holly, and Holly coming out of a room somewhere being like, oh, there's no internet here. And I was like, oh, you mean at this hotel? Well, let's just go find an internet cafe. She's like, no, in the country. And my jaw dropped for a good 5 seconds, and then we realized in Myanmar, this freedom that we have here to exchange information is so restricted that they actually have underground internet cafes where you go in and it's kind of like asking for, other illegal substances. Where you're like, hey, do you have Google? Do you have Hotmail? And they'll hook you up if you pay them some money. So, we eventually somehow kept our blog going, and we try to give ourselves the goal of posting once a week, each one of us. And like Holly said, when we got back, we had this moment of do we keep this website going when we're not actually traveling? But now at this point, it has become such an online portal for other young travelers who either want information. I mean, Holly and I come from a magazine background, so we want to bring as much service to it as we can, but just knowing that there are hundreds, thousands of other young people out there who have taken a risk, who've left their jobs to travel, have traveled after school, and who want to make it a part of their lives. We felt like we kind of just had to, turn this over to them and keep it going.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about traveling or leaving their job to travel or traveling after school. So kind of a two-part question about, I guess, the money behind traveling or saving. Or do you think it's, in your experience, wise to travel after school or to start your career? Or do you think it's different to the, unique to the individual? Or
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've kind of determined that there are a few times in your life where maybe it makes more sense to travel. If you are reading the papers these days, going online, you'll see that there's a big popularity for a gap year, which technically is the year between high school and college that people in other countries in the UK and Europe, that's a time where young people will travel. Here in this country, we do study abroad. Sometimes people travel after college, but it kind of gets sticky once you're in the working world. You're like, well, when do I leave? Am I going to commit career suicide if I travel? What will my bosses think? I'll have this hole on my resume. But we found, and we've had now several other friends who've left to travel, and I'm not necessarily encouraging that because Google's such a great place to work, from what I've heard, but that it's really not. You do not sacrifice everything else on your resume when you decide to leave to travel. And the experience that we had when we came back in was that people were really impressed that we'd taken such a risk. And we'd volunteered when we were away, we worked while we were away, and we were able to build other skills. So I really think that now, if travel is something that's important to you, you can absolutely find a way to make it work. We do think it's a good idea to have a few years of work experience, like 2 or 3 at least, so that you can come back and say, I've been in the working world and I want to come back.
Risk taking, I think, is something we value here. And it may be painful for your manager probably in the meantime to figure out for someone to deal with the workload. But ultimately, they're like, oh, wow, I wish I could do that or have the strength to do that, which I think is very commendable. In fact, I'm gonna go catch a plane. I'm gonna get out of here. I feel like I need to get out of this office every once in a while. We probably all feel like that. So, I guess like with, let's say we don't want to leave our jobs or we don't have the opportunity to travel for several months, and let's say we have to deal with our normal vacation period, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Do you feel like, how do you best maximize your time, even though you're still trying to find that balance or maybe working up towards a longer trip?
Well, I think you don't have to do something as drastic as we did and quit your jobs and backpack around the world for a year. I think, one of the things that we brought back from our trip is how to kind of get lost doing the things we love in our everyday life. And we realized that a lot of the pressure that we were putting on ourselves to achieve and get promotions and putting all our energy into the work wasn't coming from our bosses or our friends or our parents. It was coming from ourselves. And, it took us to take that trip in order to realize we have to make fun a priority. We have to make, following our passions a priority. So I think for people who have 2 weeks vacation, if they can get away for 2 weeks, maybe kind of volunteer somewhere, to get a different perspective, or go to cooking school if that's something that you want to be doing. I think that, rather than just vegging out, because a lot of times we do need it because we're working so hard, but it's good to use our time off to kind of dabble in other things that we're interested in. And I think that's how you get the most out of your time off.
Yeah,
And I would add not to be afraid to travel by yourself. I think that that's really a time where you learn so much about yourself, and you challenge yourself in a way that you might not do here when you have your friends and family around you. So if you have a week, do something structured, volunteer, go to language school or cooking school, as Holly suggested, and just go.
Yeah.
Can you describe the moment when you told your friends, colleagues, and boyfriends that you were leaving? Like, if we were a fly on the wall.
Yeah, a lot of people were shocked, but there was I was really expecting people to be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're crazy for leaving everything. But people really, there was some shock, and then people were like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, can I come? Can I carry your bag? Like, people wanted to go.
I was terrified to tell my boss. I remember it was a Friday, and I walked in the office. I had everything I was going to say prepared, and I waited all day because I loved my boss. She was like my mentor, and I didn't want to disappoint her. And I waited all day, and finally, at like 5:39, I knew she was going to be leaving soon. I ran into her office, and I was like, Stephanie, I have something to tell you. And she's like, oh my God, you're leaving us. And I'm like, yes. She's like, where are you going? What magazine? I said, it's not for another magazine. I'm leaving to travel the world. And she kind of looked at me like, what? I'm like, yes, I'm going to take off with 2 of my friends, and I'm going to travel for a year. I've decided that I'm not married. I don't have kids. You know, it's now or never. I might as well. I'll always regret it if I don't do it. So they were amazingly supportive. Like, my boss was so supportive. They even helped me write while I was on the road and gave me a column in an online magazine, or a smaller magazine, which actually went under 3 months later, like a lot of victims in publishing. But yeah, people were very supportive, friends and family. Our parents kind of thought we were nuts, but
Boyfriends
they
had
went
more
with
trouble
it.
with it.
Yeah, boyfriends went.
They're like, oh, great. Yeah.
I'm curious. Oh, hi. I'm curious how you guys approached writing in a collaborative way, because it seems like you would have had, even though you were traveling together, you would have had such individual experiences as you're traveling.
Yeah.
So, having not read the book yet, how did you actually
I'd
approach
say
that?
the blog actually really helped with that. Like, it was really inadvertent, but the way the blog got written is if something happened in our lives, it was really compelling. We're like, oh my God, I'm gonna put something on the blog about that. So when the time came to write the book, we already had this online record of things that were really meaningful to us. And we sat down once the book, we'd written the book proposal. We tried to outline it and storyboard it, and the biggest issue we had was really just figuring out of all these millions and millions of memories of what was important enough to include. I mean, it's a pretty significantly thick book, so we didn't do that great of a job of narrowing it down, but yeah, we all decided. And there really was very little, like, oh no, I want to write that chapter. You know,
Yeah.
we all kind of agreed.
I think that too, we didn't do a lot of journaling. I know when I travel alone, I compulsively journal. I will sit there and write everything down, but because we're traveling with 3 of us all together, we would talk a lot. So it was nice that we had a collective memory. Whenever I couldn't remember something, I would call Jen or Amanda. But I think that we had been traveling together for so long. I had never in my life spent so much time with 2 other people. I mean, everything from waking up to where are we going to breakfast to what are we doing today. I mean, we tended to all sleep in the same room, sometimes in the same bed, because we wanted to stretch out our budget. And I think that really helped in the collaborative book process, because we were so used to how each other thought and how we communicated that it was really easy to divide up the book and the storyline.
And you like
No, 3 different voices. We kind of played off each other. It's kind of like, sometimes I say like a Jodi Picoult novel where it's the same story told from a lot of different perspectives. So it's the 3 of our perspectives, but we take different sections or different things that happened along the way.
You would think it would be confusing, but and we were worried about that, but people who've read the book have said, you know, I had to look down to see which one of you was writing, because our tone like really became very similar as the writing continued, but so I think it was seamless, hopefully, in that way, but, you know, completely different characters.
like serious points of friction while you guys were traveling, like being so close? Were there moments? Were there any like big fights?
There
or-
were.
Did it have a productive outcome, or were they just like getting through and coming up with a compromise? Or
I
was it
think-
just tensions were high and you were just in a bad mood?
Want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest point of tension was I was like the most adamant about going and leaving work, and I had the most trouble of the 3 of us of actually doing that once we hit the road. Like, I had my laptop with me, I had the blog, and then I was also like, oh, this is a great chance for me to freelance write and be a travel writer, and I just couldn't let go of it. And Jen, who's not here, unfortunately, to share her point of view, is much more of a travel purist. She was saying, well, we've quit our jobs, we've left our lives, like, if we're going to do this year around the world, let's do it. Let's immerse ourselves in the culture. Let's not put any filters between us and the places that we're visiting. And for she and I, that caused a lot of tension. I mean, Holly tended to be the peacemaker between us because she could see both of our perspectives, being a fellow journalist, but also being, you know, a traveler and seeing both sides. So I think other than that, though, we really were able to, I think there were no divas in our group, so we really focused on the good of the whole, the good of the group, and really in that way learned to be very unselfish and to be very in tune to Holly seems like she might need a little space today. Let's let her have like the morning by herself and come back. And we weren't perfect, but we really did learn to read each other's signs. And in some ways, it was like a marriage. Like you really put the good of the whole versus the good of you, and that's how we survived.
Yeah, definitely.
Any stories come to mind?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think that it was like a lot about compromise and just really learning how to compromise. And the beauty is that we had 3 people. So if you wanted some alone time, you didn't feel like you were leaving the other person by themselves.
Right.
So 3 was a good number for us.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it's a good combination. And I guess recently the rights were picked up by Jerry Bruckheimer for turning this into a television series on ABC. Is that true?
Yeah.
What do you guys think? I mean, I'm sure that's an interesting process to turn, I guess, any literary work into a television series. But how do you see that, or how would you manifest it?
Obviously we're hugely excited. Kind of couldn't believe it at first that somebody like Jerry Bruckheimer, who's been in the business forever, would be interested in this story. But we did think like, wow, this really must mean that this sea change is upon us, and travel and hopefully stories led by strong women that will be fictionalized. It's not going to be us on TV, thank God. They have hired a writer now to create the pilot for this, so it's not 100% of a guarantee that it will air, but they already know the first country that they're going to be shooting in, and we're kind of overwhelmed.
Australia?
Yeah, I believe we think it's Australia. So
it's really cool because Jerry Bruckheimer does like The Amazing Race, so they have production companies around the world. So it'll probably be set in a lot of different countries as opposed to just filmed in the States.
Yeah, it seems like a good kind of to leverage those resources and do little small things, different places.
It'll be exciting to see, but it'll be very fictionalized. So
of course.
It'll be much more adventurous than we
might
were.
look very different than we did in the book.
Naturally. Any other questions from anyone?
So this is a pretty vague question, but I think you probably know how to answer it. Do you still consider yourselves lost?
Yeah. But I think we learned by the end of our journey that the point really wasn't to escape being lost or to be found, but it was really to embrace the idea of being lost, and that really that feeling that you have of not knowing 100% where your life is going is a really positive one, that it means that you are capable of growing and changing, and you're going to start seeking outside of yourself to find ways to grow. And so that's what we tell people, is like not to run away from that feeling, but to embrace it.
Yeah, and I think what I learned during the trip is that a lot of times I was, upset at myself for being restless. And actually, I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing to have that sense of, okay, I don't know what my future is going to hold, but I am going to live more mindfully. I am going to make time for the things that matter to me. So
yeah,
we don't want to get on lost. We like it.
Yeah, just to be more comfortable with it, because once you start welcoming that feeling and knowing that it's going to come during periods in your life, it's not nearly as scary.
So what's next for you guys? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, actually. I'm curious about that question too. But I was just wondering, on your travels, and I've traveled a lot too, and I love traveling, so your story is very inspiring to me. But was there any specific place that you guys were individually where you said to yourself, oh, I could come back and live here? Or I'm so glad I did this trip because I could totally see myself coming back here again, or something like that?
Oh my gosh, there were so many amazing places. I think I never knew how beautiful the world was until we got off the plane in New Zealand. It really was like Lord of the Rings territory with the mountains and everything. So I love New Zealand.
Yeah, I got a chance to go to Laos, which Holly, unfortunately,
I was still
in a
in
different
India
place.
in the ashram. That was the only time that we split up during the year. I stayed for teacher training for yoga, and they went to Laos.
There's so much of Southeast Asia. It's an amazing, if you guys are ever considering, taking some time out to travel, it's an amazing region to travel to for so many reasons. First, it's so culturally rich, and you really feel like you're traveling. You're not on vacation when you're there, and it's also really affordable economically. Once you get on the plane and arrive there. And I love Lao. They say Lao in the local country because it's French, or Laos here, because they just opened it up to tourism not that long ago. And I feel like in other parts of Southeast Asia that are more touristed, you kind of lose that sense of authenticity. But when I was there, it's a beautiful country. The people are very genteel and welcoming, and I really felt like I got an opportunity to immerse myself in that culture almost more than anywhere else that I went. So I'd love to go back.
And we actually, I realized we didn't tell you exactly where we went. We left Europe out of it because we wanted to travel on about $30 a day, and like Africa, Southeast Asia, South America were a lot cheaper. So we started out, we left New York, we went to Peru, Bolivia, Brazil, Kenya, India, then we kind of hopscotched around Southeast Asia, went to Bali, New Zealand, Australia, which ate up
All the
any
rest of our
remaining
money.
budget, and came back home. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm curious what your reentry process was like. A, what you're doing now, and B, how quickly, if you guys are back in the corporate world, how quickly you got wrapped up in the rat race again.
Oh, we learned that just because, we come back, the same stresses and the same pressures that we left behind were still there, but how we reacted to them was very different. I think travel made us a lot more resilient, and we maybe a little bit more braver, because surprisingly when we came back, we actually had more job offers than even before we left, which really surprised us, because we thought that we might have looked like slackers for kind of taking off and vagabonding, but actually people were really, our bosses and people in the industry were really supportive. But rather than take a full-time desk job like we normally probably would have, at least for me, I stayed freelance, which is, again, not very safe. There's not the steady income, but it was something that allowed me to still be working, generating income, be creative, but have more time for the other things that I love doing. So
I was fortunate. I'd kept up with some contacts I'd been freelancing for before I left, and got an offer about 6 weeks after coming home for a much higher level position. I was the senior nutrition editor at Shape magazine, and it was a job that I felt like I couldn't turn down. Like I had the urge to just freelance like Holly to slow that transition. But I'd been an assistant before, and like it's too big of a jump, it's too good of an offer not to do. And so I definitely struggled sitting back at the desk. I remember, like Holly had said, our year was so long because it was so rich with experiences, and I would get really forlorn those first few months when I was still at the office at 9 o'clock, thinking, oh my God, an entire day of my life has gone by and I haven't experienced it. I've been staring at my computer screen all day. So I think what the trip did for me was it made me less afraid to go in and address that issue with my boss. I think we're all really afraid sometimes of, we don't want to look like the person who doesn't want to work hard. But I was able to address that. I was able to make some changes, and was able to go 3 days a week at the magazine, which was kind of unusual. But I think because I'd had this trip experience, my editor-in-chief knew that I kind of meant business, and that if I wasn't happy, I wasn't going to force myself to stay. I was going to find a job situation that worked better. It's not always possible, but I think we've all kind of taken that commitment to really living our lives in the moment as much as possible, like through to this day. So.
Yeah, it seems like the confidence is certainly, it certainly has its, I don't know. It's effective in the workplace to be respected and to have that kind of strength. I don't know, just kind of.
Yeah, I think it's just you don't have to be so afraid to ask for what you want, and I think before we were more intimidated about asking for what we wanted, and if you don't ask, you're not going to get it, and sometimes when you do ask, you're not going to get it, but I think you feel better about yourself because you tried. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the approach we took when we came back from the trip.
Any other questions? I think we have time for one more, perhaps.
I'm curious to know how often you travel now. Have you found that you have an even longer list of places you want to visit, or you think, I've seen a lot, maybe I'll take it easy and not leave as often?
I think it's funny because you think the more places you travel, the shorter your travel wish list is going to get, but it just keeps getting longer the more places you want to go, or the more places you go, the more places you want to see. And we made a pact, the three of us, to take a trip together once a year, every year for the rest of our lives. So we've been doing that. We just went to Napa, so we're trying to do more places in the States, and last year we went to Panama. But yeah, we try to travel whenever we can, but we don't feel that desperate need for a break like we used to, because I think we've learned to just better balance our lives.
Yeah, it is still hard. I think definitely one thing we learned from this is you don't come home and all your problems are solved and you suddenly have vacation time galore. Like, it is really hard to still find the time to travel. And we'll do a lot of weekend stuff, but getting the three of us to find 1 week that works for everybody is still really difficult. It has to be a priority, which is why we set that goal of traveling together once a year. I think we really want to go to the Philippines next.
Yes.
We want to scuba dive.
Yeah. Tickets are expensive in December, though, $1,700. So we have to
find a cheaper
time to go.
Yeah.
So are you guys working on any projects together? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, we're working on a second book, How to Get Lost, which is going to be more of a guide, like how to budget, how to save. And also we're working on kind of like philanthropy part of the site. We are starting to organize Lost Girls races across the country. So we're still in the process of figuring it out, but we're trying to raise money to send nurses to school in Kenya because we volunteered through Village Volunteers in Kenya. So we just kind of want to get other lost girls and boys together across the country and kind of networking and working together for a healthy goal like a race, and to use the money from the races to kind of send other women to school to help them achieve their dreams. So.
That's really cool. Maybe we had one more question, perhaps? In a couple more minutes. Yes. The question was how long did it take you to write the book?
We didn't write it straight through. We kind of tend to procrastinate. So, I think we had it for the first draft a year to write it, and I think we waited until 9 months, and we kind of, is that right? Crammed it out.
Yeah, well, it was hard because we were all working again, and writing a book is a lot more of an intensive process than I think even I realized. So that was part of the reason I went 3 days a week. At Shape was I'm like the book will never get written if I don't start reprioritizing. So we started writing it really intensively in August and got an extension and turned it in like at the end of March. Yeah. So it was probably about 8 months if I'm doing the math correctly.
Yeah, and it took us a long time, I think, because we were used to magazine writing, which is very different from memoir writing. None of the three of us really knew what we were doing in the beginning, so I think they say you have to write 100 pages to find your voice, and I think I definitely wrote 100 pages and threw them away before we got the first draft kind of done.
So I guess being in publishing and magazines, what do you kind of think the future of publishing is going to be?
Oh my gosh, if we knew the answer to that question.
I had to ask.
Yeah, I don't know as far as like magazines going on online and things like that.
I would say that I think we're in this experimental period with publishing. I don't ever think that print magazines will entirely go away. I think that there's a tremendous amount of blogs and websites and Twitter and so much information online, and I think it's just an expansion period and testing, and it will narrow back out again as it doesn't become financially viable for writers to make 1 cent a word to write for a website. But I don't think blogging will ever go away. I think people will always want to express themselves online, and if 10 people are reading, that might be fine for for somebody.
Yeah.
It's kind of like because you guys were, the book deal came out of the blog originally, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a way to kind of help vet ideas and.
Absolutely. We learned what worked and didn't work a lot really early on, I think, from having the blog. When we started the blog, we wrote as a we voice, we didn't individualize ourselves, and people are like, what is this? Who's talking? So we learned that it was okay for there to be 3 writers. Right. And we learned, things that were really controversial. There's a chapter where we write about prostitution in one of the countries that we visited, and we really were only in this area for a few days, and writing about it, when I wrote about it on the blog, the comments were horrible because, here I was, this outsider coming in and making social commentary about, a livelihood of a young woman in Thailand. And it really opened my eyes and made me think, okay, before I write about something like this in the book, I really want to do some research. And in that way, I think it helped me to be a better writer, having a blog.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
It was very, very interesting. And I think we gave some books to some, and they'll be willing to sign them if you want to come up afterwards.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Holly.
Yeah.